This project began with you, Sarah, many years ago. I wonder if you could tell us why it took so many years to actually reach the screen.
Well, it's taken 100 years for this story to reach the screen, which seems incredible. I'd wanted to do it for over a decade. I mean, I didn't learn it at school, and then later, when I did learn about it, it seemed such an incredible piece of our history. It'd been marginalised in the history books, and it felt timely. It felt like it was the moment to resurrect these women's stories and remember how hard fought for the vote was. And also, it chimed with so much of what was going on in the world globally now.
Abi and Alison, how did you become involved with Sarah's vision?
Well, the serendipity of it was great, actually, because I had just finished a film, Jane Eyre, with a financier, and we would have out at lunch talking about what to do next together. And the subject of the suffragettes came up. We were talking about things in history that hadn't been done on film. And I was just finishing a movie with Sarah, which Abi and Sarah and I and the other producer, Faye, had all done together, Brick Lane, and I went back to the cutting room and said to Sarah, I've got some money to finance developing a film about the suffragettes. Would you be interested? And Sarah was like, interested? I've been researching that for the last 5 years. I already know everything there is to know. I'm already, that's what I want to do. So we joined forces, and before too long, Abi came on our little wagon as well, and we were off to the races.
Now, was this in your wavelength as well? Were you thinking about the suffragettes?
No, I mean, I think I was a bit reticent because I just thought, oh, God, it's big hats and it's corsets and it's tambourines and it's Mary Poppins, and I wasn't really. But I think the great, and often I think you're running away from one thing into another. So it was we'd just come out of doing Brick Lane, and that was a beautiful world and it was very contemporary. And so I thought, okay, well, at least I'll look at the research. And the fact that, and the chance to work with Sarah again was a really important part of it, and working with Alison, because it's such a lovely team. But when I read the research, I was really blown away. And I was blown away because two things, really. I realised that so much of the history had been erased, and there'd been this kind of incredible detection work by a number of historians and also the team itself to start to gather together the fragments of this extraordinary 50, 60-year period. And it was the variation of materials. So it was everything from the obvious news articles, which were often very condescending and would talk about the women's hysteria and the madness of their activity, but often not report it. You could tell clearly they were often sort of something that you could see was quite violent or epic, had been reduced to a couple of small paragraphs. And then, there was some old Pathé news footage, and there was some incredible police records which had been declassified only in 2003, which revealed the extent of the surveillance operation and the level of intimidation on the women. And then it was the testimonials, some of which you sort of see within the film, that are taken as part of the deputation. And it was these that I found particularly moving, because these were the lives of the working women, and I realised there was a sort of contradiction between often the laundries that you saw in the domestic households you saw, where the women looked pristine and in beautiful shirts, and then you would read about their conditions. And like Sarah says, so many things that they were dealing with, equal pay, appalling work conditions, sexual violence in the workplace and at home, custodial rights, property rights. They were very 21st century issues for women, and so it resonated.
Originally, your first draft concerned this upper-class story, which is much more well-known. How did the shift begin for all of you to focus on this fictionalized character of Maud?
Well, we thought it was kind of, we could have told the story of Emmeline Pankhurst, but that would have been, and there should be a story told of Emmeline Pankhurst, but that would have been the story of an exceptional woman, and in a way an examination of power. And what we were really excited by was telling the story of an ordinary woman, a woman with no platform, no entitlement, and watching her journey towards activism, because it felt like that was the way to connect to today. And often those women you don't hear those stories. And this movement brought together women across classes, despite the kind of class apartheid of Edwardian Britain. You got working women working alongside the aristocratic women.
Mm-hmm. Were you in consultation with historians as well, since this seemed to be something that was just being unearthed as you were doing your own research?
Yeah, we spoke to every single suffragette historian in the land.
Mm-hmm. Please.
I was going to say, and also you realise that there's this incredible sorority of women across the globe who are frantically buying things on eBay, and so there's this sort of black market of medals and suffragette sort of banners and newspaper footage. And actually one of the funniest things that we saw was these tiny little cubes of brown bread, and this woman showed it to us and we said, this is amazing, what is it? And she said, it's real prison bread. And we were like, where did you get it? And she went, I bought it on eBay. And there's no, and we looked at it, it was like, are you sure it's just not somebody just sort of drying Hovis bread for you and putting it back? There was no, but you could just see it really betrayed and exposed really the huge passion there is for this subject, actually.
Alison, can you talk about some of the challenges of doing a period piece that wasn't in Downton Abbey, that really showed an underbelly of London that isn't often portrayed?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's funny, but I've done a lot of historical movies, and actually portraying working class environments is actually much more challenging than upper class, because obviously the upper class, the aristocratic places have been preserved. There are, castles and cathedrals and stately homes for the picking all over England, and I've traversed through most of them. But to try and get streets that have been untouched, and to use you can't find them, so you have to use portions of streets that you then work with real set design and visual effects in order to get a 360 effect, which is what Sarah wanted and needed for the way that she works with her actors, in order to get the fluidity that to capture their performances. So it was tough to do that, and everyone, the locations people were amazing, and Faye, who is my fellow producer on this, who was brilliant at getting every single ounce of production value out of every penny. Mm-hmm. It was good that it was actually in some ways very good that we had a lot of prep time on this, even though the movie fell down a couple of times while we were getting ready, but the prep time was really useful because it meant that we could paint on as big a canvas as possible with our fairly limited resources.
Sarah, talk about that canvas. How did you as a director approach making a period piece seem like it was right out of the headlines today?
Yes, well, we thought that we would break with the convention of period films where you admire the beauty of them, because this story and what was leaping off the page was how gritty and difficult life was, and we wanted to really put you in the shoes of a woman living then. So that permeated to every department. We did, as Alison said, try to create these 360 sets and give our actors quite a lot of freedom, so that we were capturing the performance rather than staging it, and often had 2 cameras, and in the big set piece sequences we had 3 and 4 cameras. And then also the costumes were actual stock that Jane Petrie, our costume designer, sourced and felt very real. And then Kerry didn't wash her hair for 7 weeks, and we had very, very naturalistic makeup, and we tried wherever possible to shoot in locations that offered everything they could. The greatest excitement was when we got into the Houses of Parliament, because no film crew...
Which was a very unique opportunity for you. How did that come about?
Well, I said to the location manager, we have to get in, we have to be suffragette about this, and she said, no one ever has, not even the Iron Lady, no one in the history of filmmaking ever has. And I said, come on, we've got to. And we knew that Mission Impossible was trying to get in, and so she...
So how did you succeed when Tom Cruise couldn't?
She tenaciously petitioned them, and then luckily they decided to open themselves up to commercial filmmaking. And then we put in our request to take in 300 supporting artists and stunt people and vehicles and horses, and stage an anti-government protest in the courtyard, in the very place that had barred women for so many centuries, with a predominantly female cast and crew. And they agreed, to their credit, which I thought was a major marker of how far we've come.